What's the most brutal rejection you've ever gotten? When I was 17, I had a group of friends and we were planning a summer holiday to Spain. We were in the final stages of planning and ready to book, and one of them told me, "I'm sorry, there's only room for 6, so you can't go with us." They booked for them and basically left me in the cold. Enter one of them though. Since years later, one of them applied for a job at my company, and when he came in for an interview, I just smirked at him and said, "You know how this is going to go, right?" He acted like he didn't know what I was talking about as I walked him to the door. Bye. NG other than a joke. But I told my best friend of 20 years that if I made it big, I'd pay for her whole wedding. Whatever her and her BF want, super cool dude. Love him too if she let me marry them. What I meant was officiate the wedding. She got real awkward and told me she had a boyfriend, who I had just mentioned my name. I blank stared at her and had to explain what I meant while feeling grossed out by the idea. I wouldn't call it brutal, but it was certainly the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been in. Hadn't even asked her out. Anything, but word had gone around one morning that I liked her, after my group of friends were just casually chatting about what girls we thought were cute in our class. That same day, in front of my friends and pretty much the entire assembly hall during lunch, she storms over to me, yells at me about how she would never date someone like me in a million years, i.e. chubby nerd, throws my own drink over me, and storms away again to a chorus of laughter. We got to second base in the 4th year though. We dated for 3 months. I showed up to her birthday party, and after talking to everyone I noticed other guys just didn't have a clear answer of how they met her. They were from dating apps, like myself. Instead of mingling, they just hovered around her, competing for attention. 4th dude shows up and she leaves with him. Her Instagram story a couple hours later was from a bed in some dark luxury apartment looking over the city. Turn up the sound and you hear music and the show running. I wanted to fucking die. Guy ended up being an asshole, and we hooked up again 2 years later. Applied for a job. They called me back, and I was expecting they were going to set up an interview. The recruiter was mocking me because I had graduated college 10 years prior. She said, even though I had recently gained the certification that would have qualified me to work for them, they didn't like I had graduated college that long ago, even with a solid work history. Damned if you don't. She only called me to mock me. I gave up on getting a job in my field a long time ago because of recruiters like her. Sadly, she wasn't the only one, but she was the worst. Dude I was friends with in my teens reached out to me when we were both adults. Flirted, told me he could see something real with me. Invited me out to his place for a weekend, felt me up, kissed me, told me how much he loved my boobs and spending time with me. Halfway through I asked what this meant for us relationship-wise, and he said, "Sorry, but you just need to get hotter. I want a trophy wife, and you are too fat." Broke my heart. Since years prior I was bulimic and nearly killed myself. He knew. Well, now I'm no longer fat, and he's happy with some girl. Many years ago, after getting divorced at 30, I hit the online dating scene. I had essentially never dated as an adult, having met my ex-wife in college. I was not prepared for how brutal online dating was. This was in the Match a Harmony days, not the apps. First online date. We meet up at a restaurant. She walks in, sees me, and says, "Oh, you are much uglier in person," and walks out. Doesn't even sit down. Everything turned out fine. Been happily married for 10 years again, but I thought that was pretty unnecessarily brutal and strange. Dodged a bullet there. Angstha, I realized way too late, and all because of self-esteem issues. LOL. She wants to be friends, but now I do not know what to do. I treated her like one all this time, but still have feelings. Met someone online. Lived just a state across, so it wasn't that bad as far as these long-distance things go. And I'm going back with my ex. Plus you don't want me because I have poor mental health, something like that. At least they were honest at the end there. but it still hurt and confused me at the time. After that, they blocked me on every social media account. At a festival, saw two girls hyping each other. Then they said, "We are doing it tonight." They turned to me, and then turned each other, which looked like they were contemplating, then they seemed to agree. Then they turned to me again smiling and started talking to me. Seeing this whole interaction, two dudes just jumped into the whole conversation and started talking to the girls. All was happening too fast, and one of the girls said, "You're out, mister." Classes, and they all walked away. I didn't even start the conversation. Damn, that hurt. Managed to work up the courage to ask out a girl I had a huge crush on in high school, and she actually said yes. Because she didn't want to embarrass me to my face, she proceeded to ghost me completely and avoid me at all costs in the hallways. Turns out she already had a boyfriend but didn't have the spine to just tell me. Not only that, but afterwards one of her friends just happened to strike up a conversation with me that ended up in her just insulting me over and over before blocking me. I guess I dodged a bullet with that one. Talked to a guy for 3 months. Tried to meet up in those months, but he never could. Finally had to dates in 2 weeks. Both were amazing. Lots of flirting, teasing. On our second day, he came over to my place to watch a movie. I asked if he could eat me out. He happily did. The date was on Thursday, so the day after Friday, and during the weekend. Didn't hear from him. He texted me Monday. His grandpa died on Friday. Didn't talk to him after because he needed time. And 2 weeks later found out he deleted me from his following on Instagram. This week she is kind, sweet and loving. I am in love with her. She is my ex. We have had great meetings, not just us, since she left, and even though it probably annoys her, I am in love. I finally did what I didn't even do when we were dating, tell her exactly how I felt. Zero response. It wasn't kind to say nothing. But she doesn't have to say anything. She's under no obligation to do anything for me. However, the no response is the second most painful rejection ever. It has really fucked me up. Take care. Going out with my school girlfriend for years. She left 1 year, came back, and we got back together. Things were doing great. And then I asked her what she thought about us being more than just boyfriend-girlfriend. We were 22 at the time. She laughed, looked at me straight in the eyes and pierced my heart with a dagger, saying, "You thought I would marry you," while continuing laughing. I couldn't live near the thought of her anymore. Moved to Paris and then moved 2,000 miles away across the Atlantic. In hindsight, it was a little brutal, or just a sign of how this person was. Basically, we had been talking off and on for months, primarily online, until she traveled to this country for a visit. We had a nice time. Even shared a kiss together. Maybe it was something. Well, apparently not, because she met a guy in an exact city a day or so later and had this enchanting time with. So enchanting she slept with 8 guys to get over the guy after me. Good to know that in the end, I was just a side note. I played a show for the local band I was in. It was about midnight. I mentioned I was going to hit up the Coney Island before I went home. She asked if she could join me. She did. We had a great time. We went back to my place and smoked weed and talked. Then we took a walk to the park nearby and sat down to look at the stars. I moved in closer and she says, "I have a boyfriend." Well, okay, could have said that from the beginning. I don't mind just hanging, but the vibe didn't feel like we were just hanging. Somehow, in grade 8 I found this boy's email who had been in my kindergarten class. We talked every day. I think we ended up going to a church dance with my friends and his friends. After that he basically stopped talking to me and started dating my friend. He thought he was overweight when he was little and refused to cut his hair because he thought it'd make him look fat. I was fat, so I've always assumed when he saw me in real life, he became horrified. His new girlfriend was my tiniest friend. I had just fucked the brains out of her. Probably the first time she had multiple orgasms in one session. She was completely blown away by it. She started to get really curious about me, as if she found her fucking dream guy. She asked me why I was single. I told her that I had a fucking huge student loan that crippled my whole fucking life for my entire decade of my 20s. Then she sat up in the bed, started getting dressed, and told me to call her when I finished paying off the student loan. I met a girl online once. We met downtown and she offered to drive us to this bar. We go inside and get a table. Before we even get our drinks, she says, "I can tell this isn't going to work. I only date men who are professional athletes or business owners." I was kinda shocked but stayed civil because she still had to drive me back to my car. That was an awkward drive back. As soon as I left, I was back online looking for a different date because I didn't want to stew on that one too long. He told me for almost 2 years that he was emotionally unavailable but still slept with me, took me for food and drinks, cinema trips, had sleepovers, etc. Call it quits. I asked why he couldn't give me a chance, and he said if anything was going to happen, it would have happened by now, instead of straight up telling me he was just using me for sex company. We're currently no contact, and I've never been happier. Wrote poetry to a girl in the grade above me. When I finally admitted it was me who was writing them, all she said was, "Oh." I was so crushed I stopped. 2 decades later, I found out from someone that Theo wasn't disinterested. It was that she knew it was me and didn't realize I thought I'd kept her in the dark. She'd actually loved getting my little letters in her locker and would read them to the other girls who'd all be jealous. If I'd known she knew, I would have never stopped.